Welcome, everybody, to our first annual Black History Month Film Festival. I could not be more excited to be in conversation with the one and only Maddie Rich.
It's good to see you. Good to be here. And number one, thank you and thank the Boston Globe for just acknowledging the Inkwell and having the Inkwell be a part of the Black History Month Film Festival, which means a lot. And I want to thank all of the fans and the supporters of this movie, especially my cast and crew, and you, Janae, for thinking of this movie and how I read your article, which was very sweet, and what this movie meant to you. And so it's good to be here.
The Inkwell, to me, you are just one of the most brilliant thinkers. And I think this thing happens when we're Black and we're vulnerable and tell stories, and people go, "You're so brave." And,
Yeah.
and it's like, no, we're actually just trying to live our life
Yeah.
and tell our truth. But I do want to talk about Drew. Um,
Mhm.
to this day, it's been over 20 years, and to this day, Drew, as you wrote him and as played by Lorenz Tate, is one of the most tenderly written characters for a Black boy that I've ever seen. Um, what inspired that? Like, what inspired your decision to do that? Because I don't feel like Black men often get to be soft and especially boy, like to be soft and tender. There's such an adultification of young Black children, and you gave him everything.
Thank you. Well, um, when I was given the script of the Inkwell, what drew me was seeing African Americans not living in poverty, not struggling, uh, a family, people who were well off at this historical African American slice of life in Martha's Vineyard. People don't realize that the Inkwell, uh, from many, many decades ago, you had some of the most famous people like Paul Robeson and, um, you know, so many famous people would go to the Inkwell, to the beach, because this was their life. And that was one of the things that I enjoyed when I read the first draft of the Inkwell. But then it was this young kid, Drew, who was having issues as a young youth, mental issues, where in the beginning of the film, the audience will think that he actually burned his house down, which caused the family to visit his mom's sister's house in Martha's Vineyard. But as the movie goes on and you see this young man who is kind of withdrawn in the beginning, he has a doll called Yago that he talks to and he shares his stories to. And he actually goes to therapy while he's on the island. We haven't seen that in African American life, where you see a young person, especially a young African American man, blossom and open up when he is speaking to the therapist played by Yvonne Phyllis Stickney, or Phyllis Yvonne Stickney, sorry about that. And he comes to life, and you see him grow and come of age through his conversations with the therapist, and you find out that it was not him burning his house down, it was an accident. He was doing an experiment, science experiment. Um, but what resonated with me was, you see African Americans who are Republicans, African Americans who are Democrats, all in Martha's Vineyard, but they're family, even though they have issues with each other. Uh, the theme of family in love, supersedes that all.
The I think the nuances of Blackness in that movie, especially, at that time and still now today, are so rare to have that many multitudes and that much richness of who we are and how we can express ourselves. Being able to have like what is perceived as a radical with, alongside a conservative, arguing, but then also, like you said, loving each other and hugging each other. And then there's the class dynamic.
Yep.
And, when we talk about Oak Bluffs, there's this, I think that people, in Martha's Vineyard, there's this forgotten history. I think people so dismiss a place like that as a rich white place. And they're like, oh, there's all these white people there. It's more white than black. And it's like, yes, it is true. Martha's
Right.
Vineyard is mostly white. Martha's Vineyard is very wealthy, but there is a part of Martha's Vineyard that is very black, has always been black. It's where
Right.
freed slaves were able to buy land. Like there's a rich black, as to your point, Paul Robeson, lots of artists of the Harlem Renaissance, Madam
Mhm.
C.J. Walker, like it has a long generations deep history of black pride and black celebration and black respite.
Yes.
Um, why do you think, because people, when I wrote my story that was inspired by your film, and then I did the filming of A Beautiful Resistance, our episode that was also inspired by you, a lot of people kept asking me like, well, how come I didn't know about this?
Yeah.
And why do you think the joyous parts of our history sometimes get tucked away?
Well, that's a good question. I think that people systematic racism plays a part of that, in putting African Americans in one box is part of systematic racism. I grew up in a loving family. My mother was loving to me, my brother and sister. But I spent time and was raised in Red Hook section of Brooklyn, and moved out to kind of like a working class area near the Park Slope area. But people don't want to tell those stories. They want to put us in a box that if you come from a certain area, a certain neighborhood, you are deemed this, right? And this is part of the reason why I wanted to do the Inkwell, because Janae, after I did Straight Outta Brooklyn, I got a lot of offers to do all kinds of different movies, really good movies that have now, some of them have, came to life and become successful. But I didn't want to do another hood movie. I wanted to do a movie that showed a different slice of our lives as African Americans, right? Something that you wouldn't expect from me, but you wouldn't expect me to understand because I didn't grow up like Drew, right? But I wanted like that life, like most of those kids that I grew up. You wanted to one day, take vacations with your family, right? And so when I go back to my point of when I read the script, I was immediately, it just hit me like this is out of the box. This isn't what people would expect from me as an artist as my doing my second movie. They would expect from me doing something, another Brooklyn hard drama, someone dying and things of that sort. But as an artist, I always think, what do I want to say? Not who do you think I am, but what do I want to say as an artist? And I can't take all the credit in the Inkwell, but because the cast members from Lorenz Tate, Jada Pinkett Smith, I mean, Glenn Turman, Suzanne Douglas, Mary Alice, Dwayne Martin, I mean, it's Morris Chestnut, it just goes on and on. They all got it. They all got it. And what did they get? They got the purpose of why we were there, to show that African Americans are not in this box, that there were and there still are African Americans who are working class, who are well educated, right? They are Republican, they are Democrat, they may have different issues, but in the summer times, and some of them may even live on Martha's Vineyard, this is where they have respite, that they can feel at peace, that there is no, there's racism everywhere. But in that small little section of the Inkwell in Oak Bluffs, it was ours. That you could walk on the beach and no one could tell you that you can't sit there or lay there and do that. And that's, as an artist, that is what drew me. And I'm so happy that they didn't get this movie. And when I say they, the audience got it, but Hollywood did not get this movie when it came out. A new generation, thanks to people like you, Janae, and other people who've seen this movie and say, I identify with that character. I identified with those people and had made this movie. I mean, just I'm so thankful and grateful because I didn't know when I did this movie what would come of it. I just put my heart in it. And so it has outlasted and is called a quote unquote classic. And I'm forever grateful for
Oh,
that.
it is a classic. Like to me, that's undebatable. It's a classic. What made you decide to shoot? You shot in Winston-Salem or North Carolina?
We shot in Wilmington, North
Okay.
Carolina. And so I wanted to also shoot, my goal was to shoot on the vineyard itself, but getting a crew, getting cameras and all the equipment was going to be a challenge to put on the ferry, and it was just a challenge. So what I did do is myself and the production manager and our team, I spent some time on the vineyard, literally took pictures of the actual, the beach itself, the homes, and we did our best in movie magic to recreate that slice of life called the Inkwell. I would have loved to do it at the actual place, but it was very difficult to manage and put that kind of equipment and dolly track, not dolly track, but cranes and things of that sort on that ferry. So, but we did it. We shot it in Wilmington, North Carolina. You couldn't tell us we were not in Martha's Vineyard. And the actors always say that they had the time of their lives, portraying these upper middle class or upper class African Americans. Even though some of them couldn't relate to that, but they just loved it and they felt the love of these characters.
And I just want to remind everybody that this discussion is being recorded. It will be sent to everyone who registered, so you can access it at any time. We did start a little late, and that's all on me. The film will be available for streaming until midnight tonight, so you can just revisit your emails. A link was sent for that. Um, this one of the things about movies is that over time, how they feel to us change.
Yeah.
Like what you thought you saw as a child looks different as an adult, and just lived experience changes how you receive art. Um, when Drew loses his virginity, it's like such a big deal, but it's also, at that time, the type of like Mrs. Robinson storylines and things
Right.
like that were pretty like common and normal. But now the
Right.
climate we're in now, it's like,
Right.
no. So can
No.
we talk a little bit about that and like,
Yeah, I think that at the time, as you mentioned, they were, talking about losing virginity and things of that sort, like in the movie, classic movie that Dustin Hoffman played. I wanted to make sure that, even though he was coming of age Drew, that, we as filmmakers and me as a director be respectful for that. Today, it's a different day. It's a different era. And filmmakers have to be, and writers have to understand that 2021, 2020, the modern day, you have to be careful when you're talking about, and you should be as an artist, any sort of uh, coming, sexuality and things of that sort. And I know that some of the things that artists back in the day did should not be done today. So in doing the scene when he comes and he's coming of age and having that his first sexual encounter, that as a director, I did not want to show that, right? And there are other films that have gone and done those kinds of, things, but for me as an artist, you have to have some responsibility when you're talking about things such as that. And so I made it a point to understand that there's lines that you should not cross as an artist. And that's just kind of who I am and what I stand for.
What was the most enriching part of this film for you? Like, what did you walk away from the Inkwell with?
Um, that it's important for us as African American artists to be heard, to understand what Black love really is. It is not just, it's loving yourself inside, it's really listening to each other. And especially when it comes to Drew in a relationship with his father, is understanding if your child has any sort of mental issues or that is going through something mentally, that you have to hear them and listen to them. And that was one of the biggest things that I really wanted to display as an artist. And to me, that really is Black love. Yes, there is family. Yes, there's relationships. Um, but truly getting back to, what family means, right? It's not about success. It's not about how much you have. It is truly about me loving you as my family member, me loving you as my, you know, relative. If we really say, we go around and we say sister, brother to each other, but really, what does that really mean, right? Do you really mean that when you call me brother? Do you really mean that when you speak to another sister and say sister? What does it really mean? Do you care? Or is it just a form of just being formality of. So Inkwell to me has lasted this long because people identify with family, what the family that they really want, right? And the love that Drew received from his family, and also the love that Drew received from himself at the end. If you look at the movie again and you see how the character began, and then you see how the character ended at the end of the movie, you saw growth.
Definitely. And I think to your point about love and especially when we talk about Drew's mental health and we see Drew getting therapy, we see Drew's family kind of embracing him, even though his dad struggles a little bit with Iago, but we see like this whole kind of attention and tenderness to helping him, helping grow him, helping nurture him, helping love him through it, hold his hand as he heals. And it's so interesting to me because that was so groundbreaking in the 90s, and it's still like we're still working to destigmatize getting therapy and like seeking help if we have anxiety, depression, and all these things that I think as a community we're told like, oh, just dust it off, you're okay, grind through it, be
Right,
strong, you'll be
right,
okay. And it's like, no, like sometimes things hurt and sometimes we're anxious and sometimes we're depressed, and we're allowed to have that humanity. And
right,
that's what was so special and powerful about Drew, and also seeing his relationship, like actually seeing his relationship with his therapist, um, seeing his relationship with Iago, um,
right.
and kind of learning what was driving, like, his anxiety and how he feels about himself. And then watching him with his cousin, who's so cool and buff and just like pretty much like the cool black character that everybody would want to have a crush on in a movie back in that era.
Yeah,
Um, and they had this. I guess I just want to talk a little bit more about how black men are portrayed in that movie and the relationships they have, the tenderness, and like even though there's like fighting and conflict between the uncles, there's still this ability, like as you said, to come back to the love and to communicate, and the hugs and the daps and there's just so much tenderness, kind of like what we saw in movies like The Wood. uh,
yes. Yeah, I mean, you just hit it. It's the portrayal of the Black man, right? And some of society's portrayal of the black man, especially if you're a darker shade black man, is dangerous, right? And I wanted to show that there is this black father who was a former Black Panther, right? And that, yeah, he had some really political views. Then there was an uncle who was a Republican who believed in the ideology of President Nixon, right? And he was, well off. So you put these two black men together and you understand each of their views. You can take whichever side you want, but that's not the point. The point is to hear them both, right? Is to hear them both. But then, if you just look at the two men at the end of the movie, well, there's the scene of the tennis scene that everyone likes when two men are playing tennis, and it just becomes kind of like the icebreaker because it was very tense between the two of them. So it was kind of the icebreaker, and it's funny and things of that sort. But then there's an understanding at the end of the movie between these two men. No, they're not changed. One is still a Republican, one is still a Democrat, right? One is still a former Black Panther, the other is still, believes in the ideology of Nixon. But guess what that changed? Is that they're listening to each other, that they understand each other's point of views. They're not trying to talk over each other to say, I'm right and you're wrong and I'm right or whatever. That is not what they did at the end. That it goes back to the love factor.
And there's so much in that movie, so many characters that you're intrigued by. Um, but the central focus is Drew's family, but then you still wonder about, Jada Pinkett's character and she's literally a latchkey kid, spending all this time alone. She's got
Yeah.
this big grown man boyfriend. Um, how much got left on the cutting room floor? Like what didn't we see?
Wow, that's a good question. My editor, Quinny Martin, God rest his soul, him and my first cut of the Inkwell was probably 2 hours. I can't remember, Janae, what got cut, but it was 2 hours. And just keep in mind that I was 21 years old when I directed this movie. And I remember being in a production meeting, post-production meeting with executives, and I would fight tooth and nail for every frame. And they were like, well, Maddie, this is a 2-hour running time. We got to cut this down. And I'm like, no, 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 no. And then my editor, who was like a father figure to me, Quinny, he would sit me down and say, okay, Maddie, just breathe, calm down. Let's just try to edit this movie to tell the best way, because as a filmmaker, you have to be collaborative. You have to be collaborative. When I did Straight Outta Brooklyn, that was my baby. I wrote it, directed, I produced it, I acted in it. That movie, I breathed life, the breath of life in that movie. The Inkwell was different. It's a studio movie. It's a Touchstone Pictures / Disney movie. So you have to hear, you have to listen, and then you have to collaborate. And when you're an independent filmmaker going to a studio system, you have to understand that. And I tell filmmakers all the time to jump from indie film to studio movie, being a studio movie director. The biggest thing is listening and working within the notes that you get. So I don't remember actual scenes that were cut, but we shot a lot. But I remember the editing process was heartbreaking for me, because there's some things that I wanted to keep that I just could not because of the running time.
Is there anything you would change about the film or about Jada's character?
With Jada, the Lauren Kelly character, she was, like you mentioned, a latchkey kid, and there was this thing with her and Drew that we heard that she was dealing with her parents and pain with her parents. Um, she also tapped into something in Drew. Um, and what she tapped in was finding love or experiencing what love is, far as loving someone outside of your family. And that scene with them when they were running and they jump in the lake and catch the lobster, that was his first experience on loving someone outside of his mom, right? And then for her dealing with uh, someone where she loved the fact that he had two parents that were together, and she wanted that in her family. So the Jada's character was really pivotal for the story in the character arc for Drew.
For Drew.
Yeah, and then seeing the young Jada, who doesn't like and love a young Jada and
Well,
the young Lorenz together? I mean, it was just beautiful.
well, and at that time, Jada, that role was a really like Lorenz has played at that same time. Lorenz was playing like O-Dog, and he was his career was already, as young as he was at the time, it was very diverse and nuanced, and he could just play anything, it seemed. Jada had been typecast in
Yeah,
such a way, and Inkwell gave her a different person that we had not seen from Jada,
yeah,
which we also got to see it in Jason's Lyric and like other softer, like we got to see more nuance kind of after.
right.
Um, but talk a little bit about that because you have heavy hitter, like young heavy hitters in there, like
Yeah,
Lorenz Tate, Jada Pinkett, Morris Chestnut. I mean, you have OGs in there too that were
yeah.
like seasoned at the time, but you have like super new talent at that time, and you yourself were only 21.
That was
Um,
21. I tell you that when I first saw Lorenz, I got a private screening to Menace to Society. And to see him as Old Dog, right? It's like, wow. I don't believe Lorenz was even 19 at that point. I think he was like 18. In and then when I saw his performance, I was like, wow, okay, he's a thespian, he's an actor, right? And then when I met him, and and then he read, and then there was a conversation. He mentioned that he and Jada wanted to do this part together, um, and then I was like, okay, once I saw him, that's Drew, that's Drew. It didn't really take convincing to studio execs because he was so phenomenal in Menace to Society. Um, but I'll tell you this: when I sat with Lorenz, and when I saw him put on the wig and put on the boxy shoes and the corduroy pants, he became this character. He went from playing a notorious dog in Menace to Society to finding the innocence of a young boy.
it's just
That is, to me, you talk about acting.
it's so expansive and extreme. Like O-Dog and Drew, it's one of, I mean, I don't think we give Lorenz enough flowers
That's right.
for the vastness of his career.
That's right.
But also,
And also, to your point, not to cut you off, but to your point, the young Morris Chestnut, right? And um, Dwayne Martin, absolutely amazing. Vanessa Bell Calloway, the great Joe Morton,
Joe Morton.
the great Mary Alice, AJ Johnson. I mean, Phyllis Yvonne Stickley. Suzanne Douglas. It was just absolutely phenomenal. Now, they knew my age, they knew my story, but they didn't look down at me they didn't, they did not, because most of them had been in the business way longer than I have. These great people embraced me as a young filmmaker. And I remember the big scene when Drew was running down the street and I had like 200 extras and fireworks in the background. And I had this walkie-talkie, and then there was this crane. And I was sitting in my director's seat, and the great Glenn Turman looked at me and he says, you did good, boy. And it touched me so, and I was like, wow, right? So that's the support that these people gave me, that you could see on the screen, that yes, the director gets a lot of credit, but for this movie, I have to give it to the actors, and of course the crew members and the producers, Irving Azoff, John Jashney, Guy Rydell. I mean, the list goes on of people who really supported this film.
And we talked a lot about love and family and the nuances of Blackness. But something else I want to talk about, because you said, you made Straight Outta Brooklyn and you didn't want to make another Straight Outta Brooklyn,
Yeah.
and you didn't want to make a film where it was like someone has to die and it has to be Black suffering and trauma porn. Um, what does Black joy mean to you?
Wow, that's Black joy is I can tell you two people that I felt Black joy is seeing President Obama and Michelle Obama together when he became the president for the first time, and he walked out and they introduced that man. To me, that was Black joy, right? Is I'll go back to what I said earlier, is loving us, loving who we are. It's not about if you have a Bentley or what kind of car you drive or plane you ride in. It's about love, it's about community. And we are, as a community, are now getting to that point. I see it now. I see it in film. I see it in the television genre. I see it now that we have so many African American producers who have streaming deals, writing deals, actors who are now directors and working on their own content. And the content that they want to do, Janae, is what I did on the Inkwell, is showing Black experience where the mama is not on welfare, the daddy ain't in prison. I'm not saying that those stories don't matter, right? But we are a multitude of people, right? And it goes back to what I said earlier, is they like to put us in a box, but now we are outside of the box. And now Hollywood wants to hear what I hear that from my colleagues is they want to hear our stories,
Well, I feel
our
like
experiences. Yeah.
when you define people by trauma and measure them by burdensome, like, by burdens, it disempowers them and strips them of their humanity. And
Yes.
I think to talk about Black joy, to have entertainment and film and artistry center on stories of Black life outside of that is so important. Something I've been asking Black people for the last several months, so I want to ask you is, what makes your life a beautiful resistance?
Wow. My family, most importantly, God, my faith, right? It is my purpose on this earth, and I've known my purpose since I was a kid, right? Is knowing that you have something to say and give to the world, and tapping into that, tapping in. And when you have a purpose on your life, there are a lot of resistance. There are a lot of forces and resistance that in people, and some of them could be in your own family, that want to hold you back when you have something to say. I can tell you that as an artist, when you know that you have a gift, and that your gift has no financial attachment to it. It's just touching someone's life, like the Inkwell touched you, to write that great story, and that how the Inkwell touched a lot of other people. And that's what an artist is supposed to do. Yes, it'd be great to get the rewards. Yes, it'd be great to have 20 movies and things of that sort. But guess what, Janae? I have 2 movies, Strata Brooklyn and the Inkwell, that I can be so proud of if I never do another project again. Because these 2 movies, as an artist, I gave myself, I touched people, I affected people, and that is what being an artist is using your gift, using your talent to touch somebody to make a difference. That's an artist. That's when you talk about black love, that is black love. And that's who I am.
Oh man, that's so beautiful. And I'm glad you brought up your two film. You made both of those films you made before you were even 22 years old.
Yeah.
And then you kind of stopped and you moved into video games and other forms of storytelling.
Yeah.
What prompted that decision? I know you said if you never do another project again, but I mean, is there a hope that we may still one day see another Matty Rich project?
I hope so. Yes. I'm an artist. I'm still breathing. I'm still here, right? So as Steve Harvey said, he ain't through with me yet. But I tell you that the Inkwell, as glorious and respectful as I'm getting so much accolades for this movie now. Janae, when the movie came out, Hollywood didn't understand it. I'm telling you the God's honest truth, they didn't understand it. I remember Jeffrey Katzenberg, who hired me, he was the head of Disney. He said, Maddie, don't be discouraged, because I was feeling discouraged. He said, don't be discouraged. This is the little movie that could. Watch me. I've been making movies a long time. Jeffrey Katzenberg said this to me because I thought, remember, coming from independent filmmaking, and Sundance is a home. It's like my second home. It gave me the start of my career. That this would be kind of like the second thing of Maddie and how I bursted on the scene with Sundance. No, it took a while to become what it is now. Like he said, this is going to be the little movie that could. So I was told that when your movie doesn't perform in Hollywood, that there's this mystical thing called director's jail. I never heard of this term ever in my life. They said that the only way out of director's jail is for me as a writer to write. So I wrote the Tupac Shakur project. I got hired by HBO to write that project. I was set to direct that. I worked with Deborah Martin Chase, who's fantastic. She hired me when she was working with Whitney Houston to write Subway Scholar for Showtime. And I wrote a number of other projects that were set up at studios, but I wasn't making films. Remember, I'm an artist. I happened to meet Yves Guillemot, the CEO of Ubisoft, at E3, the video game convention in LA, through a friend of mine. And I met with Yves. They had this video game on the convention floor, and he asked me my opinion, and I said, it needs work. And he, right then and there, said, hey, I would love for your help. And Ubisoft flew me from Los Angeles to Paris, France, and it was supposed to be for a couple weeks. I wind up staying there for a very long time and became the creative director and art director for the entire video game team. And I wrote the game. The creative director, art director, I worked with a team in Hong Kong, and I used my God-given talent as a storyteller in a new medium in the video game world. Lorenz Tate, he came on board and became the playable character. And some of the other actors and friends of mine came on board, and we titled the game 187 Ride or Die, and it did well for Ubisoft. So I used that new medium, stepping in that new medium to make me hot again, right? Whatever that is. And so that has propelled me to to now venture in television, film. Now I have an opportunity where people going back to Black love, people are now wanting to listen to what Matty Rich is up to. And I did a short project called Cure, which is the story of this African American boy who was born with miraculous healing powers. And I screened that at Sundance last year. That went well. So I'm hoping to set that up and film Loretta that is in development. And then I have another project called Caller 100 that's in development.
That's so
So
exciting.
yes, you will see more of Matty Rich. I'm not done yet. It's been a while. These days, I also like teaching. I'm a screenwriter instructor for the American Film Institute, which I'm super proud and love being there and, giving, sharing my stories. And then I also am an instructor at Sundance Coab, where I, do writing and directing, and then work with on the video game side, working with the Center for Learning Unlimited, where I'm teaching young autistic young adults how to write video games. Remember, when you have a gift, you have to share it. It makes no sense to hold it. You have to share it. And you don't have to get paid a lot of money for it, but you should get paid something for it.
Artists should be paid for their art.
That's right.
I have a couple of audience questions I want to get to, but
Okay, sure.
before I get to those, I do want to say, like, I think a lot of us, I understand Hollywood didn't react how they should have to the Inkwell, but I think a lot of us who were teenagers at that time, like me, I was probably like 14, and I carried that movie with me my entire adulthood.
Okay.
So I think, for so many of us, it meant more than Hollywood could possibly understand, even at that time.
Thank you.
And knowing that there was a place where, the water could be ours and the beach could be ours, and we could have that type of joy and respite and luxuriate, because, that's something that people don't readily equate as being accessible to us, and we should be able to luxuriate whatever that looks like for us, be it laying out on the beach or
That's right.
doing ballet, or many of the things we saw happen in that film, playing tennis.
Yes.
Um, one of a really great question from Zara B is, as a master artist, what advice can you give to other artists about how to develop and access the idea of Black joy in themselves and in their art?
Well, I tell you this, study from the best, study, do your homework. And what I mean by doing your homework is we live in the streaming era where you could literally, stream whatever movie, current movie, old movie. Is if you want to be a director, directors direct. They're visual people. So you have to watch movies. I always tell directors that you have to create a lookbook. And my lookbook is just a binder. And when I see images and shots that mean something to me, that touch me, I write them down. So directors are visual. So you have to write what you see. So when you get the opportunity to direct, you have a book, your own Bible to draw from. Like writers write, I think writers should write every day, just like a singer, could be at their home and they sing when they come out of the shower. What does writers do? Is you have to train your brain to write when you don't want to write. Like now in this pandemic, I always tell people is you should be getting ready right now as an artist. You should be writing. There's so much time that we have during this pandemic that when we come out of it, and we will come out of it soon, you should have your scripts, your pilots, your reels. If you're an actor, everything should be ready. Artists, you have to stay ready. You have to stay ready because that is when you really tap into, who you are. You can't wait, because if I waited, there would never been a Straight Outta Brooklyn. No, you have to tap when you feel that spirit that hits you, don't ignore it. Don't pull it off. Oh, I'll do it another day. No, you have to sit down. You get an idea, write it. Once you start writing an idea out, watch, your brain will start, oh, here's another idea. Here's another. Here's another. Here's another. Next thing you know, you have a outline or script.
Well, and you also taught us to listen to ourselves when we need to rest or get help. So if in
Yes.
the pandemic you are anxious or sad or depressed or experiencing traumas,
Yes.
like
Yes.
also, listen to that instinct and
That's really important. Is especially in the times that we're living in, is don't be afraid to ask someone for help. Don't be afraid. You could be the strongest of men, the strongest of woman. You could be a high level executive. You could be hiding in your mask of all the great luxurious things that you have. But we all know what it is when you have that inner voice inside of you, that there's something aching in you. And that's when you should talk to someone. Don't talk to yourself. Talk to someone. You have to release it. And that's what the character, Drew, he did. It took him a minute to talk to the therapist. But once he started to open up, and you realize it wasn't just some crazy kid talking to a doll called Yago. No, that was the only thing that would listen to him until the therapist listened to him. And that's when his parents started to listen to him. Yeah.
you did such an amazing thing during the therapy journey where she does his hair. And, in the Black community, that's a serious love language. That is a serious,
Yeah.
that's a serious bit of intimacy in our community. And it does feel like a healing when a person does it with love. Well,
Yes.
can you talk about that decision and the inspiration behind that?
Yeah. Well, Drew starts off with an afro, and he's withdrawn. You can see that something is troubling him. He's not being heard. And as he continues to go to the therapist, played by Yvonne Stickman, Phyllis Yvonne Stickman, um, he starts to open up. And remember, he kept Yago in his bag. He would not let anyone see Yago, his doll, until she asked him. And then once he felt comfortable with her and he showed her the doll, the braiding of the hair was a symbol between the two of them, that she understood him, right? And that he has to let other people in his world and talk and open up. And so that was a good symbolism of the connection, because she had locks and he, had locks. She braided his hair. So yeah, that was a connection that I wanted to do. Yeah. And you're right. That is a connection that goes back to slavery with us, the braiding of the hair, right? And when I grew up in New York City, I had braids down here all my life. And, so that is definitely a connection. Yeah.
Boo said I should ask you about the Brady Bunch.
Well, the Brady, whoever that was, they must have saw me on Arsenio or something like that back in the day. But the Brady Bunch was the ideal family for me growing up. That was always on TV, and that was something that I wanted to see us. And when I say us, I wanted my family to have that kind of life, right? And I happened to be on an episode of the Arsenio Hall show back in the day, and Miss Brady showed up on the actual couch, and it was pretty cool. But it goes
Oh,
back to,
this Boo is from Red Hook and said
oh,
y'all.
I figured that. Okay, from Red Hook. Okay, that's hometown. That's hometown. I love Red Hook. Shout out to everybody in Red Hook. Um, Red Hook is a special place to me, will always be a special place. It is, people would say it's in the south area of Brooklyn. Um, it's a large community when you talk about Black love. Uh, Growing up in Red Hook, everyone knew each other. Everyone knew their mama. Your neighbors would whip you if they see you, outside, not going to school. It's a community, and I got a lot of my stories growing up in Red Hook. Seeing friends who went one way where they should have went the other way, and there are a lot of creative people in Red Hooks all over the country, this country of ours. People who live in housing projects.
Boo
Who
wants me to remind you that it's Boo from Red Hook and y'all used to sport braids together.
Okay, well, there you go. Yeah, I used to, people remember me. I had braids, I had a gold tooth. And, my brother is popular, in the Red Hook. And so, yeah, good people, good place to grow up.
um, I think people sometimes, when we talk about the Inkwell and it being like a strip of the beach that is Black, there's this question like, oh, well, is it just for Black people? Are these things just for Black people? Are these movies just for Black people? Can you talk a little bit about?
Well, let me tell you, Janae, I've been told early in my career by studio executives that the stories that I want to tell, they don't travel foreign. What does that mean? That means that people in Europe will not watch these movies because they have an all Black cast. They're Black love, Black theme, Black stories. And I always push back on that, um, because our culture is the hippest culture in the world, right? Look at marketing. I've lived in Europe. Worked in Hong Kong. I worked in Seoul, Korea. I see hip hop all over the place, all over our culture, our music. How can you tell me that our movies don't play and won't play in countries outside of the United States? Straight Outta Brooklyn played and still plays all over the globe. How can people in Japan, they did a Japanese poster with my face on it for Straight Outta Brooklyn. How can people from Japan relate to people living in a housing project in Red Hook? Because they can, because it's a human story, because they're human. They're not all rich. They know what it is to struggle, you know? So it is important for us as artists is to be true to who we are. Now Hollywood is interested in hearing who we are. By the success of Black Panther, you see that our movies play not in the millions, but the hundreds of millions of dollars. It's always been like that. We just never had the opportunity to get the distribution outside of this country the way that we deserve. Now with streaming, you see a lot of Black content that are doing extremely well on the streaming platforms. Why? Is this all Black people watching? No, no. The Black experience is the American experience. Just step outside of the country. First time I was in Paris, I'm riding around on a moped. I'm seeing young people listening to hip hop. It may be in a different language, but nevertheless, it's hip hop. I'm seeing our posters, movie posters. People are watching our content, but Hollywood once again says, "Oh, it doesn't play foreign, so we're going to give you a little money." But that has changed now, thanks to Brother Ryan Coogler in Black Panther.
What's the last movie that made you smile?
Wow, the last movie. That's a good one because I watch a lot of movies. Um, I'm a big Denzel Washington fan, and He's always been, giving me good advice. He did a movie. I mean, all of his movies are great. Um, there's two. I recently watched the movie John Q. People slept on this movie of Denzel. And people are probably saying, "What's John Q?" John Q is a movie that Denzel starred in, and he played a father who worked in kind of like a mining mill town, and his son had a heart disorder, and he could not afford um, the medical bills, and so he went to the extreme to save his son's life, and I thought that was so beautiful, like it made me cry up and tear up because I mean Denzel is Denzel, right? But just that love that he had for his son, that was great. And I also am a huge Viola Davis fan, and of course Chadwick, God rest his soul. I watched their flick Ma Rainey's Black Bottom. Um, that made me smile just to see like black performers at the highest level, actors at their highest level, delivering performances that take you out of whatever you're doing. That's what Ma Rainey's did for me. Is just to see Chadwick's work was just phenomenal. And Glenn Turman, I don't want to give away the ending, uh, but that was just, you talk
Yeah,
about master,
it was
like
powerful.
thespian.
Um, you've been so generous with your time, and I just want to thank you so much. Suzanne Douglas is on the vineyard on the ancestral lands of the Wampanoag people, and she says thank you for casting her in the
Oh,
Inkwell.
well, Suzanne, she is an incredible person. I remember working with her and Joe Morton, and once again, it goes back to she was and she is such an artist that the cast did not look at me as a 21-year-old kid. They looked at me as an artist, and they're artists. And they embraced me, and I'll never forget that as an artist. And I think every artist should feel that way, where, sometimes when you're a director, you feel like you have to be smarter, right? You have to be sharper, you know, you have to be stern. No, you don't. You have to be open, right? And then you have to trust the people that you're working with to take your note as a director and take it to the next level. And Suzanne Douglas did that, and so did the other actors in that movie.
I have one last question and then we'll
Okay.
close. Before I ask that last question, I just want to thank everyone for coming. Um, thank you for your grace. Life threw me a couple of curveballs today,
Oh,
so
it's all right.
we started a little late. The whole conversation will be sent out to everyone who registered. The film is available for streaming until midnight. And here we are. It's Black History Month, and
Yeah,
everybody be taking care of yourself so we can have Black futures. But
that's
as we
right.
celebrate Black History Month, I would love to close with you telling us the role of the artist when it comes to witnessing and expressing um, our time and our history.
Well, speak your truth. Speak your truth. Tap into your gift, right? If you don't know your gift right now, study, study, study. I did not become a director overnight. I read books when I was a kid. And to be honest, I stole books from the library of filmmaking, things that inspired me. You have to tap into your gift. There's never, it's never too late. You're never too old. You're never too young. You ain't too black. You ain't too poor. You ain't none of that other than tapping into your gift. If you say you're an artist, prove it. Don't prove it to anyone else, prove it to yourself.
Ooh,
If
I love it. What's a book they need to, what's a book, all of one book that we all need to read?
Oh my God, one book. Well, remember, I'm a filmmaker, so the first film book that I read was a book by Lenny Lipton. Lenny Lipton. He's an author. I think it was the Guide of Independent Filmmaking. I believe that was the title. And remember, I never thought that I would do a studio movie. It was always independent movies. It was always, how do I make a movie when you have no money? How do I do something, the impossible, and make the impossible possible? And how I did it for myself was learn first what you want to do. No one will believe you if you haven't studied. If you don't study your craft, how are you going to have me follow you or give you money? If you are not studying, like really studying your craft, like really writing if you're a writer, like really making a short movie if you're a director, like really studying your craft if you're an actor or actress. Nobody's gonna believe you if you don't believe first.
You got to
That's
love on yourself and see that joy in yourself.
period. That's it. But
Thank you
it's
so
been a pleasure. Thank you, Janae. Thank you everyone for your constant support on me, my career, and the Inkwell. And I can't wait to show you what I'm working on. It's
I can't wait to see. Look, we not all of us, none of us can wait. We are so excited. Just thank you so much, Maddie,
thank
for
you.
your like, Hollywood just they don't know. They don't they can't be the dictators of how we value our art and how we value each other. And I'm not the only uh high schooler who saw that movie and carried it with me throughout life on the good days and bad days. So thank you for that gift.
Thank you. Thank you. And thank you, Boston Globe. Appreciate it.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
y'all.